gentlemen, we believe Donald Trump is a direct threat to the EU, he is a direct threat to American democracy, and he is a direct threat to the world. Therefore, we support any policy meant to oust him, and specifically this one we believe is going to be very effective. Mechanism, then 2 points, being one, why the EU should do this, second of all, why this will be very effective. So firstly, in terms of mechanism, what we're going to do is we're going to find through hacking evidence of corruption and scandals by Trump himself and by any member of his administration. We are going to do things like go, first of all, on the collaboration with Russia, obviously, but also many other things Trump has done along the years. We're going to talk about his connections with the Manhattan mob. We're going to talk about his. We're going to find the Russian compromise of the golden showers thing, and we're going to publish it. We're going to do all these things, and we're going to massively put them on Facebook through targeted advertisements and all the ways in which Russia has done this quite effectively. We are, however, not going to fabricate evidence at any point. We believe there are enough terrible things Trump has done that we don't need to invent any. Secondly, we're going to do this in secret, just like the Russians have done. Obviously, this will be exposed after a period of time. When we see how the Russians have done this, it took about 2 years. Therefore, by the time people find out, the next election will have already been over. Thirdly, we assume the EU is doing this as a united manner. We think the motion gives us this fiat. Yes.
Don't we know all this already, and it didn't have an impact on his ascension to the American presidency?
I'm going to analyze this, obviously. So, okay, why does the EU need to do this? First of all, we say that Trump is attacking the EU directly. Through things like concessions to Russia, through abandoning NATO, he is literally threatening the EU's physical security and the security of its citizens. He is trying to dismantle the EU actively by doing things like saying France might get a better trade deal if they leave the EU, by his ambassador to Germany supporting the AfD. All these are direct confrontational elements against the EU. Why is this important? Because we believe, first of all, the EU has the right to defend itself, and we believe that right supersedes the democratic rights of citizens of another country when the EU is involved in making this policy. But secondly, we also believe this is better for American citizens themselves, because a lot of voices within the United States today are being silenced through propaganda and media being used both by Russia and by Trump himself. We are balancing this out by giving them by giving more of a voice to the anti-Trump camp as well. Thirdly, we say this is equivalent to a humanitarian intervention, to the point where Trump is separating children from their families as a bargaining chip. We say this is a crime against humanity. This is something that the EU has an obligation to stop wherever it is happening, even if it happens to be a large country. So, why is this going to work? This is going to be the bulk of our case. Firstly, we say this is likely to lead to significant risk. We are able to do things like make people within the White House resign their currently held positions because we expose things from their past, dark skeletons in their closet, dark secrets about them, allegations of corruption. We're saying the White House is already about 60% understaffed, and at the current moment, that means less ability to actually apply any policy you want. Like, no matter what Trump wants to do, he needs those people around him, those advisors, to operate the executive branch when he doesn't have these people because they've been compromised, because they're quitting, and because nobody wants to take their positions because of the disincentive. In knowing that everything about you will be found out, we say that is a significant debilitator to the Trump administration. Secondly, we say that the policy Trump is acting on depends on Congress. Congress is already quite hostile to Trump, as we see it today. However, there are many things. They are willing to swallow it to the extent that it serves their political careers, because they're afraid, for example, of people like Steve Bannon running other people against them in their own constituencies. Why are we able to counteract this? First of all, because when we expose things directly to constituents that cannot go together with our values, like family values, like things like being someone who's seen as a hawk, when his entire constituents know that Trump has been colluding with Russia, this is the point where he does not have the electoral ability anymore to side with Trump. Moreover, we are very much willing to run these campaigns against congressmen who have been supporting Trump, again exactly counteracting the incentive. Thirdly, we say we have a massive influence on public opinion because people are constantly exposed to this on a day-to-day basis. What does that mean? First of all, it means just less support for the Trump administration in the public eye. Second of all, this forces the Trump administration to do a lot of damage control instead of its harmful policies. We say all these things are huge impacts on this administration's ability to function. Now, obviously, Trump is going to claim the EU is doing this, but first of all, he is already claiming that anything published against him is a conspiracy by some unknown factors, by a deep state or whatever. We say that the delta here is very small. Secondly, we say that the average person exposed on Facebook does not necessarily believe that this is the EU or does not necessarily know this, but moreover, we're saying the facts themselves, while there may be interference, the facts themselves being exposed to people are true facts. They can be corroborated. There are emails with dates. There are things journalists can later follow up on and show to be efficient. Do we influence people who watch Alex Jones? Probably not. Do we influence people on the political center? Do we influence people who are voting in congressional races? Definitely yes. So why can't we? They might ask, why can't we just hand over these things to Mueller, for example, if we have all this information? We say first of all because Mueller still depends on the notion of impeachment, which does not necessarily come within a Republican Congress with the incentives we've just described. Secondly, because his mission is limited in its scope, it doesn't include all the other terrible shit Trump has done. Secondly, and thirdly, Trump can fire Mueller at any point. That is not true for this policy, which he cannot block. So we're saying that in effect, Trump will not be able to carry out the terrible policies he's doing today, because he will be shut out both in terms of being able to operate the executive branch, both in terms of being unable to pass legislation through Congress and get budgets for his plans, and because he is smeared in the public eye. All these are hugely important. So, note also that they might claim, oh, but Trump is going to lose the next election anyway, why do we need to do this? Two things here. One, he might actually win, because the Democrats are currently going more to the left wing. They are adopting the harmful identity politics doctrine, and therefore very likely that he might win again. Secondly, he needs to lose in a landslide. Why? Because otherwise the pernicious ideas that Trump has instilled with the American system are going to remain there, and the next one might be worse. So we need that victory to be very decisive, and we need more than that, that administration to be dysfunctional as possible to make sure that first of all it can implement its policy, but also that no one else would want to elect such an administration in future. We should do this. We can do this. We are very proud to propose the motion.
The opposition.
Cool. You good to go? The opposition's case is hinged on the genuinely insane premise that there is insufficient information out there about the collusion between Donald Trump and Russia, or the collusion that was given to him and his campaign, or his crimes with the mafia. Literally, that is like all that news has been for the past year, and it has failed to persuade people. The fact that a foreign actor that is immediately going to be found out is then going to use that to sponsor news stories on people's Facebook feeds, and somehow that will be determinative, is ridiculous. This is a violation of the promises that the EU makes to itself, and it is profoundly counterproductive in combating the challenges faced by Donald Trump. I'm going to do those two arguments, but firstly, one point of rebuttal, why this will absolutely not shift the outcome of the election. Because the opposition's whole case here is just, firstly, they're able to get additional bits of information that could not be gathered by domestic news sources. It is unclear why that is true. These are well-resourced and well-financed departments that have been able to get an enormous amount of information. And critically, I guess the question, to use that expression, is like, what is the delta here? Like, at what point does information stop being useful to these people? I think, for instance, the point at which there is credible reporting that a P-tape exists, it is unclear how additional records indicating that Donald Trump met someone who was in the mob once are in fact determinative there. The other thing to say, though, is that all of their mechanisms were subsequently contingent on that. Like the idea that staffers are going to be resigning because there's going to be more information put out there about them. Well, that's already happened. A good example would be Rob Porter. And what that's led to is staffers who do not have much dirt on them. For instance, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, like, yes, she may be a liar, but she has an unimpeachable personal life. And the other thing that we hear is that there's congressional hostility. That is not true, because even if maybe the mainstream American population does not like Trump, his base is obviously going to distrust this information regardless, and they are the people that they are afraid of due to the gerrymandering effect that has created the circumstances in which it is incredibly difficult to challenge any incumbents as long as they have the political support of the president. So, this will not meaningfully change the outcome of the election. My second argument in substantive will detail why this is far more likely to lead to a continuation of the Trump presidency. Firstly, why is this an unacceptable violation of the rules-based order that the EU claims to support? The EU makes claims to support two things in this debate. The first is the existence of a rules-based order that is predicated on mutual collaboration, even in circumstances in which it is not necessarily convenient or lining up with their ideas of what a democracy should be. That is to say, following rules when they are inconvenient for you in the short term binds other people to follow them for you in the long term. And the second thing that the EU claims to support are democratic rights. That is to say, the idea that countries should be able to interfere with their own affairs, but not the affairs of other countries. Those are values that are good in and of themselves, but they are also well within the interest of the EU to maintain. Firstly, they give the EU plausible differentiation for their border states when they're considering whether or not to ally with the EU or with Russia. Secondly, they form the backbone of security alliances like NATO and trading blocs like, for instance, the EU, which is literally predicated on the idea of rules-based order. And importantly, the United States is an ally of the European Union. They are not someone who they are at open warfare with, so to conduct this sort of campaign would be seen as deeply hypocritical. And what we heard in that prior speech is firstly, that Trump is attacking the EU so it has a right to defend itself. But they miss the content of the attack. It is not warfare, rather it is just the withdrawal of some diplomatic support and mild withdrawal from certain areas of previous diplomatic collaboration. That is obviously not an act of war that justifies overcoming virtually every principle that the EU cares about. And the second idea that we have is that it is a humanitarian observation because minorities are treated terribly. This one gets closer to home, but I think at the end of the day, that is at best an argument for EU leaders to openly make that case to the American population if they choose to care about a rules-based order and democracy, recognising that those things are good for human rights in the long run, then they need to live up to that premise even when it gets a short-term bump in the road. Trump does not meet the standard in this debate, particularly given, in the first instance, that Trump was democratically elected, which means he is in line with their premises. Secondly, that the criminal justice system is still operating the way that it should, that is to say the Mueller investigation continues forward, and critically, statewide jurisdictions are also capable of correctly prosecuting him as they have been doing. And thirdly, the democratic system is responding, that is to say there is excellent information out there and American people are going to make an incredibly well consented to decision when they make that vote. This is outside of the belief that the EU has about the world order, and those are good beliefs that should be maintained. But secondly, why does this make things worse for Trump? The first thing that I want to establish here is that they are obviously going to be discovered. All we get from that speaker is they believe that they are not going to be discovered. Here's 5 reasons why they will. The first is that it creates a paper trail. That is to say, obviously, every time you interfere, you leave evidence behind that is then able to be retrospectively observed. Secondly, the United States is on incredibly high alert. That is to say, they will literally just have their democracy interfered with by a foreign power. They do not want it to happen again, and the national security apparatus opposes that. Thirdly, the United States has a much larger cyber warfare capacity than any other country in the world, simply because the DoD is 24 times bigger than the next biggest one. And given that the big complaint about the EU from Trump is they don't spend enough on military spending, it's unclear how they do this well. Fourthly, Russia and China both also have excellent cyber warfare capacity who will be looking out for this sort of thing, and they have a huge interest in telling the United States if they notice anything because it would puncture the relationship. And finally, internally, there is a very high risk of whistleblowers. That is to say, someone ideologically inside of the EU's Department of Defense or whatever might think that this is a bad idea and go to tell the United States. And critically, for this policy to work, these things can't just be possibilities, they need to literally never happen, because once you discover one instance of EU interference, in the first instance Trump will run with it, but in the second instance law enforcement will look for it. I'll take closing if you've got anything.
Yeah.
Opening?
Yeah, so do you support the EU, for example, intervening to support democracy within places where the democracy is failing?
In certain circumstances, for instance, when they have not lived up to other promises. But I think, and I guess also, democracy failing in that circumstance means like literally there's been like a revolution or something, and it is like there's no votes anymore. That is so far removed from what is happening here. Someone who is like a bit ugly and more conservative than us has become the president. Why is this an incredibly bad way to organise a response? The first thing to say is that Trump's response, when it is discovered that he is the victim of interference from the US, from the EU, is going to be a catastrophe. There is already a low-key trade war bubbling. That's probably going to get worse, given that Trump is an incredibly vulnerable and emotional man. It's probably going to lead to less cooperation. For instance, on cybersecurity projects designed to stop Russia from doing this kind of stuff, it is almost certainly going to lead to discursive retaliation, and it will probably lead to a relatively closer alliance with Russia, given that that is a trade-off. He faces domestic pressure, but his personal instinct pointing towards Russia. Secondly, it validates all of its fake news narrative completely, because there is good evidence that it is literally true that an awful lot of news is fake news, which means that it is relatively harder for journalists to push back. Thirdly, Trump's domestic re-election gets much easier. Firstly, because he is able to portray himself as under attack by a foreign power, which is a narrative that will be compelling, because the EU is not particularly popular. Just think about the way Americans talk talk about the French, but also because it's very easy to portray yourself as being under attack. Also, it removes one of the most powerful attacks from the Democrats' arsenal, which is that Russia interfered and we should correct that democratic mishap. Now, both parties are the victims of foreign domestic democratic interference in a way that is problematic. Finally, as I've already established, it collapses the credibility of the EU in the global sphere, which means then that they have less power. This is a shocking, disproportionate, ugly, ineffective response to the problems faced by the president.
Great, thank you very much for that speech. The Deputy Prime Minister, in case of
In 2020, Donald J. Trump will almost definitely be re-elected as President of the United States. When that happens, the good values which opposition talk about and say the EU should promote will cease to exist. The EU in its current form will cease to exist. The West will cease to exist. We think faced with that scenario, the EU has to take the ultimate step of interfering within the US to defend itself from this kind of political apocalypse being inflicted by its supposed ally. 2 points in the speech. Firstly, why we should assume that in the absence of something dramatic, Trump is going to win re-election. Secondly, why do you think this is a uniquely effective way of stopping him? For that, responses to what we heard previously. So, firstly, they said there was sufficient information already available about what Trump had done. We would say there are sufficient rumors, there is very little specific information or specific facts. And those rumors all get pushed together into a single kind of globule which has become undamaging, where we can release specific information that's more damaging. Secondly, the way that information has been released has been wrong and ineffective. No, thank you. There have been long-term rumors about Trump which haven't been added to. Yeah. Contrast, the Russian campaign against Hillary is drip, 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 new scandal every day, dominate the news cycle every single week. That's what we will do. So every day, CNN, Fox News, etc. will have a new, not individually destructive, but cumulatively, utterly destructive attack on Trump, because there will not be anything else being reported apart from the latest dramatic leak. Thirdly, they say that why can't this be done by the domestic media companies itself? We think that the EU has 4 unique capabilities for which the New York Times does not possess. Firstly, money. The German budget surplus is currently 50 billion euros. That is many times the operating budget of the New York Times. If we pour even a tiny percentage of this into defending the EU from these attacks, we can buy literally anything which is on the market from anyone to damage Trump. Secondly, we have hackers, which the New York Times can't have. Thirdly, we can be illegal. We can do things like bribe people, like break illegally into government computers. Fourthly, we can offer people asylum and state protection. A whistleblower coming to the New York Times worries they will be beaten up by a Trumpist mob or prosecuted by the government. We give them asylum in Luxembourg and they have a nice life. Secondly, in terms of are we going to be found out, they give us 4 reasons why we're going to be found out. Firstly, there's a paper trail. Look, basically this takes 2 years for the Russians to be found out and it's still not definitively proved. Our observation would be that the Russians do it very carelessly. There are a whole load of open source emails, literally in Gmail, where people are like, oh, we've been found by the CIA, now we're having to work much harder. Anything the Russians can do and not be caught for 2 years, the Germans can do much better. We have much more money, many more intelligence capabilities. We think we are going to do a fantastic job and it's unlikely we'll be caught for at least some time. The second reason is because the element of surprise is so overwhelmingly on our side. No one is even going to begin to conceive this is a policy we would consider adopting, and therefore they won't be looking for it. In terms of the idea that the CIA will defend Trump, what we would say is the CIA and FBI utterly hate Trump at this stage. They literally view him as a traitor in many cases, someone who is working against them. Now, does that mean they won't investigate? No. Will that sufficiently inhibit their investigation? Probably. That gives us more time and a reduced chance of being caught. Finally, they say the US has a large cyber warfare capacity and the EU's shit at war. True, what we do have is lots of money, so we will just buy all the best hackers in the world and win. Okay, but let's say we are caught, right? They say that it will be really damaging because now Trump will be being accused, no thank you, of colluding with a foreign power as well. Look, Trump is president of the United States. He is not facing impeachment. His poll numbers, whilst not great, are actually fine, and everyone knows he has been attacked. He has been supported by Russia. So clearly, actually being supported by a foreign power isn't all that damaging. So we don't face any significant harms if our candidates know they are being supported by a foreign power. And it doesn't seem to be a story which cuts much ice with the US electorate. Why? Because they have got bored of this sort of story. They assume everyone's corrupt anyway, and they've just started to tune out. So we think the Russia story is not currently an effective attack line for the Democrats, and the European story, and it'll probably be secret anyway, won't be an effective attack line for Trump. In terms of less cooperation if we're caught, yes, there will be less cooperation if we're caught, but the current trajectory is towards a total collapse of the relationship, as I'm going to demonstrate in my first point anyway. Therefore, we have to take drastic steps to stop Trump being re-elected. Finally, they say that this is principally wrong because it's an act of war, we should obey the rules-based international order. At this stage, the EU is literally the only power which is even pretending to obey the rules-based international order. Note, all the moral benefits they give us are contingent on other states also obeying it because we've set a precedent. We don't think Trump or China or Russia is going to choose to play nice because the EU has chosen to do so. They will just see that as weakness and exploit it. In terms of interfering in another state's democracy, frankly, we would say that the EU interferes in other states' democracy all the time. It interferes in the regions of its neighbours when it's in its interest. We will do so because it is in our interest in this case, and ultimately defend the EU, which is more important to us than anything. We also know Trump is literally attacking and seeking to undermine the EU and its functionality, and therefore we're justified in defending ourselves. So, firstly, why do we think Trump is likely to win the re-election? 3 points here. We think the Mueller election is going to fizzle out and die. Why? Because Trump almost definitely has not collaborated actively with the Russians. Because he is so incompetent that if he had, it would almost definitely have been released by now, because they would not have done so in a sufficiently subtle way in order for it to be kept secret. Go for it for this long.
If it is true that people are really tired of any story about collusion with foreign powers, why are they not at least equally true with the biggest news story of the past 2 years, which is that Trump has bad media dealings and some of his staffers are idiots?
So they are not going to be bored because this is going to be so dramatically better than previous news stories. Because it's much better to hug the P-tape than to say it may exist. Because it's much better to buy damaging documents which show Trump colluding with a mafia official than to hint he may have done so. So it's the specificity which is useful. Look. Also, do we win? Maybe not, but side opposition has to cop the fact that Trump is probably going to win the next election, and the damage is implicit in that. Secondly, there will be no impeachment. Short of murdering Ivanka, we think it is likely that congressmen are going to continue to be so sycophantic they are not going to remove Trump. Frankly, what is he going to do which is so much worse that they will impeach him in any circumstances? Thirdly, in terms of the election, we would note that the US president should be assumed to be re-elected. It's the norm for US presidents to be re-elected. Secondly, the Democrats are going in a far left direction of buying into Trump's culture war if you look at the candidates they are currently selecting. So even if they think that the election is the Democrats to lose, we have reasons to believe they'll lose it by opting into Trump's culture war narrative. Finally, we would say any reason they can give us why Trump will lose re-election is also a reason why he should not have been elected in the first place, and we would expect him not to have been so. So if he was elected in the first place, he could be elected again. At that point, NATO will probably cease to exist if he defunds US military in Eastern Europe. Attacks on the EU will intensify. We have to take this desperate but probably effective measure to defend ourselves. Proud to propose.
Thank you very much for that speech. Welcome to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, G013.
Which microphone? Anyone? Any of them have loads? Can you try it first?
Question? I want to begin by asking about the question of hyperbole in this debate. They tell us that they will have the element of surprise. if they have the element of surprise, why do we imagine this policy will surprise all the experts? Maybe because it is massively disproportionate and no one else in the world thinks this would be a good idea. But also, any administration would be more isolationist, in the same way the Obama administration was, following overextension on the part of the United States and the rise of China. So who are we comparing this administration to? For us to believe this is like an assault on the EU, we would have to believe some alternative administration would be different. They also point to the resilience of US democracy themselves when they talk about how they would trust the impeachment process, which is not currently happening. But also, the last thing I want to say on hyperbole is that words have an actual meaning, which is to say, pursuing a policy not in the EU's interest is different from establishing that Donald Trump is undergoing a sustained attack on EU sovereignty. Even if he is not supporting NATO to the same extent, that does not justify a retaliatory war, which is their language, against their security partner, especially if we want to compare that to the other way that security partner might still act in their interest. So, first question, will this be discovered? We give you five reasons why it will be discovered. They respond only to the first, which is about the paper trail, and their analysis here is Germans will be better at this than Russians. That is not like what the analysis about a paper trail really was. The analysis was that inherent to all their methodology is because you're leaving like a packet of information on someone's server that wasn't otherwise there. You're putting ads on someone's Facebook feed. Like those things are tracked. Like we think that like if we imagine their thing was successful, the administration have an interest in asking why, or probably go after Facebook and ask them to disclose its documents. They'll probably, the more successful they are, the more the red flags go up that people are responding abnormally, and we think that points ever more quickly to questions that will follow that paper trail and find out where the attacks came from. But also, Prime Minister came within a hair's breadth of conceding this at the beginning, first by boasting about the scale of the assault, but second of all, by asserting that the status quo, like the previous version of this, only took 3 years. Because when time sensitivity is a key part of your policy, any leakers, like whistleblowers, will know they are on the clock and will be all the more likely to leak if they want to undermine this policy. And we'll note from what Ben tells you is that it only takes one person in the chain of command to leak this, whereas they need everybody in that chain to not leak it. But also, it was empirically far less than 3 years before substantial suspicion and a consensus emerged about what was occurring before, even if it took longer to perfectly collaborate. And most of the damage was done when the suspicions began, not when the final outcome was made. All our other mechanisms about why discovery will occur are still intact, and that is why the rest of this debate occurs having established that this is not something likely to be found out. This will at least do at least as much damage to the United States alliance as to the Trump administration. First, because the administration controls the narrative of how this attack is represented. They have every incentive to do so, obviously, because it is useful for them to say this is an assault on American sovereignty and mobilize opinion against it. Why do they have the capacity to do that? First, because any news reporting here will lead with what the administration's response was, because that will be the main part of the story relevant to US voters. But second of all, because the government controls all the institutional level responses. So for example, if trade sanctions are mobilized, that becomes a lead story. That is a lever that can be pulled in this case. That, by the way, backfires against the EU tremendously and is likely to accelerate the problems they are concerned about. But even apart from that, the point is the administration has that power. The second reason it will do damage to the alliance is that the convention is that administrations are the legitimate representatives of their nation. That is the way we treat administrations. That is distinct from the fact that this particular administration is transient and likely to lose re-election in 2 years' time, which is nothing we'll contest a bit more later on. But the convention of treating the administration as a legitimate representative means that this is a sovereign attack on the United States, not merely the Trump administration. Finally, the administration, in essence, is the US alliance until that point in time, which is the reason that Obama was chastened by Angela Merkel when the phone tapping scandal was revealed. That is because most of your diplomacy and your security and economic relations are conducted by leaders and senior officials behind closed doors. To the extent that you are undermining your relationship with the individuals on the other side of that relationship, you are catastrophically undermining your ability to influence them with that soft power behind those doors. Are these tactics legitimate? Before I move to this closing.
Russia is continuing its efforts in cyber information warfare. The Trump administration is lacking in incentives to stop them. How do you posit to suggest that the Russians will be stopped from continuing?
I do not accept the burden that it is the case. This is the job of the US to respond, or the job of the EU to respond to. If that is an attack on the United States, that is a reason for the United States to respond. So, why is the self-determination of the American people here critical? Because first, their autonomy relies on minimal threshold of the quality of information flows. That is to say, the fake news you support, including the tactics involved, exploit institutional biases in news media, such as sensationalism and those promotional incentives. But also because this undermines US democracy in the long term by validating Trump's narrative that fosters skepticism of those institutions. Also, autonomy requires the authentic, generation of those preferences in relevant individuals. This is a question that belongs in the hands of US people, not the EU. This is not, the European government has done nothing to establish why the EU paternalism is justified in this circumstance. All they say on this question is, we do this all the time, but the other half of their case is, this is an unprecedented attack in retaliation for the way the EU, the way Russia behaves the way America behaves towards the EU. If it is so unprecedented, this is not something within the realm of what is legitimate, so that point falls to our side. They tell us this will be effective. We think, first of all, it is empirically subject to the diminishing returns. That is, we have not seen a growing tide of anti-Trumpism in response to clear stories about it, but also because fake news activates tribal loyalties in a context where Trump defines his tribe, partly in opposition to the stories that criticize him. Also, on the question of staff resignation, staff are appointed primarily in the Trump administration on their ability and willingness to tell the most obvious possible lies. Firstly, because the administration has an interest in scrambling accountability, but second of all, because that is a way to test their loyalty over competing senses of duty. They say that this is just, the status quo did not work because it was mere rumor. That's empirically false, because often Trump himself was on the record saying these things, but also because there's forensic reporting in places like the Wall Street Journal that do catalogue all of the ways the administration has behaved. But also, don't run away from your own model, which is about rumors, about spreading rumors about this administration. That is a harm in this debate. Why do we think that the EU can make progress on these issues, without, including humanitarian interests, without resorting to this? We think it can wait 2 years or 6 at most for the Trump administration to pass into the realm of history. The reason we have confidence in that is the American people only mildly voted and not by a majority for Trump the first time around. We think it is difficult for him to win re-election in those circumstances. But also all the diplomatic back channels which do not make the US lose face the way it would if it conceded to an assault like this. Compared with trade sanctions and tariff exemptions, many countries were able to win by going through the back channels to the way that the Paris Accord had to be torn up to avoid Trump losing face. We think there are better ways to pursue the EU's moderate goals in response to Trump's foreign policy. This is a crazy act of war we proudly oppose.
Even if Trump is voted out, Trumpist populism will not die. Especially if the basis of Trump being voted out is not that he has bad policies, but because of scandal, because of corruption, because of the piss take. You never actually address the underlying reasons why Trump was actually in power to begin with. And that will be the basis for extension. First, this policy, which will likely be found out, will decimate the left for a generation and actually boost Trumpist populism in the United States. And second, how this prevents the EU from actually reorientating their security policies and weaning themselves off the United States. Before that, 3 salient points of rebuttal. Firstly, will this work? I just don't buy the characterization coming from opening government that Trump is going to win the next election. There are a myriad of factors why not. Firstly, anti-Trump activism is rife. Trump has the lowest approval ratings of any president at this stage of the resistance. People who previously never voted in politics are now joined the resistance because Trump is so abhorrent to them. The Democratic Party has a great chance in the 2020 congressional elections because even in deep red districts in places like Ohio, polls say that they will swing blue. Robert Mueller has just managed to turn Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, against him, as well as Paul Manafort. All these factors means that there is a high chance that elections will do their work. And we think there's a better alternative. We're not doing nothing. We're letting the democratic system sort itself out. We're letting the American voters vote Trump out on the basis that his policies are bad. That his tax cut is a kleptocratic cash grab that doesn't actually help the people he claimed to help. And in my extension, I'm going to show you why that is a better alternative whereby the Democrats actually appeal to the working class rather than this policy. Next extension, people they won't get found out. Let's put it this way, they've come up with many factors why the EU will do this very well. But they've admitted that the EU is less sophisticated than Russia in cyber warfare. And Russia was still found out by the FBI and the CIA. So what we think is more likely to happen is that even if the EU does this really, really well, it will probably be found out in 5 years' time or 4 years' time, probably maybe after the election's over. In my extension, I'll show you why that's still horrible. Lastly, this point that the EU needs to build its capabilities by attacking the United States. That's like saying Israel should invade more countries to keep the IDF shut. It makes no sense, right? Just have war games and practice a bit and you'll be fine. So this point doesn't make sense. First extension, how this will decimate the left and boost Trumpist populism. Now, even if everything they say works and Trump is unelected, the Trumpist ideology of protectionism, of racism against racist minorities is still a thing and is still powerful in the United States. The problem here is that analytically and for structural reasons, the left is always more susceptible to accusations of not being pro-American enough compared to the right. Firstly, because the base of the left is not traditionally American, Midwestern, white, Midwestern and white. Their base comprises of cosmopolitan whites as well as racial minorities and are always susceptible to be accused of not being American enough. Even if the right were to collude with foreigners, which is what happened in this election, because the support base comprises people like the military and, let's put it bluntly, white people, the rhetoric that the right is not American enough will never gain that much salience. When you represent the banks, big businesses, and the military, you will always deem American enough. That is why when the left sided with Julian and Ethel Rosenberg during their trial and they were found out to be Soviet agents, the left spent 50 years trying to prove to the American public that they were actually American enough, that they were actually patriotic enough. But second, the basis of Trump's appeal is that the left is comprised of the cosmopolitan elite that doesn't care about the concerns of the working class. So if 10 years from now it's found out that Donald Trump was voted out because actual cosmopolitan Europeans steps in and causes him to lose, they would think that it is once again the left ignoring the concerns of the working man in the Midwest as well. Lastly, you lose the actual nationalists who might be allies against Trump, but might not entirely agree with you. People like the John McCain right or the Lindsey Graham right, who detest Trump just as much as the left. So for all these reasons, the left, which is currently on the ascendant, will be pushed back because of your policy, even if a Democratic administration is brought in. But you disagree?
Yes, you completely ignore our analysis. It says that only through the targeting and in cyber warfare we can know what messages would appeal to those voters, and we wouldn't tell them stupid things. We would tell them that Trump is collaborating with the big banks.
No, you know how you can do that? The Democratic Party has posed as a party machinery that is pretty powerful and able to identify the needs of working class whites in the Midwest. We don't need Frenchmen of Belgium to tell the Democratic Party what they should tell their voters. That makes absolutely no sense. But the last part of this extension is this, that Donald Trump is actually Trumpist populism's worst enemy. Because even though he believes in terrible things and he's a good ideologue, he's not a good president. He's not disciplined enough, he doesn't know enough, and therefore he doesn't enact his policies to the degree that they could be enacted. They're still pretty damn terrible. But imagine if the people think that Trumpist populism was never given a chance to enact its policies in full. It was never given a chance to fail. What this means is that the next time, the voters are likely to vote in someone who actually believes in the same things Donald Trump and Steve Bannon does, but is able to do it better. A Donald Trump plus, so to speak. And your policy capitalizes that by ensuring that he is not voted, he's voted out solely because of the cyber information warfare that you claim to promote. We don't think that's right. We think we worsen the situation, and all the harms you say Trump is threatening the world with will accrue, but even worse in future. Next, this prevents the EU from reorientating its policy because the entire government bench assumes that if you vote Donald Trump out, things will go back to normal. That is not true. Regardless of whether you have a Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump administration, if Russia were to invade Germany, neither party will sacrifice a single American life to save Europe as well. For the same, likewise, regardless of whether it's a Socialist Democrat administration or the Trumpist administration, none of them are likely to sign a new trade pact with Europe right now. For the simple fact that American retrenchment is not just a Trumpist phenomenon. It has been going on since the days of Barack Obama, when he refused to intervene even after Syria crossed the red line. So your policy doesn't really do much, and this policy simply refuses to see that the United States will diverge from the EU regardless of what your policy does and regardless of who is in power. It is widely acknowledged that what the EU needs to do and what European countries need to do is to look inward and spend more on its defense, reorientate its welfare state such that they are no longer reliant on the American security umbrella in order to defend yourself. Find its place vis-a-vis China and Russia in the new global order and ensure that they are able to defend themselves in the event that Russia were to attack them. So we think that if you resort to this policy, all you're doing is really kicking the can down the road for the simple fact that it does nothing whatsoever to solve the underlying reasons why the United States is not acting in the EU's interest as well. So even if they were to succeed in every way that they talk about, it does nothing whatsoever to Europe. So this policy will taint and decimate the left in the United States, leading to all the harms you talked about, but worse. We're immensely proud of folks.
Thank you very much for the speech. Welcome to the open flip.
Yeah, we're going. Okay, yeah, that's great. So, we'll come up with a nice case. We'll be able to expose new secretive information and advance that to voters, which might affect actual political change. Sorry, OG. OO answered them, listen guys, we've been trying this information for a while and voters are quite tired of it. COAT voters are generically tired of the sort of messages that the DNC is advancing. Secondly, OO advanced a lot of harms which are all contingent on the specificity of this intervention being discovered. Therefore, we choose to place our extension in two strategic places. Firstly, why the EU will not be discovered. Secondly, why there is a unique effectiveness that can only be achieved when the EU uses these specific messages of targeting via social media, of using misinformation, exactly those methods prescribed in the info site. And thirdly, why even in a post-US-EU cooperation area, we're better equipped to deal with that era once we've trained ourselves in cyber, once the EU has trained themselves in cyber and is not helpless in front of the Russians. Now, what attacks do we get on our engagement? And we say very few. First of all, this idea that the EU is less sophisticated than Russia. This ignores a very interesting fact about the status quo, which is the EU is currently collaborating with the US on cyber. Through a collaboration named Five Eyes, which includes countries like Australia, the UK, the US, and countries in the EU, it is collaborating and learning a lot from the Americans. So therefore, it's not starting from a starting point of zero, starting from a starting point of collaboration. Please note that this collaboration ever breaking up is contingent on being found out. We still continue to enjoy this collaboration. So a very strong starting point from the EU. Secondly, Russia is not very sophisticated and the EU is. Like a body like GCHQ is just better than the Russians at sophisticated, high-level, persistent threat cyber capability. The Russians are good at throwing out a lot of dumb hackers which do dumb shit, like sending, which do dumb shit. So the EU is extremely sophisticated. So on war games, a dire lack of engagement with the fact that if you need to address the screening protocols of Facebook, if you need to bypass the screening protocols of Twitter, if you need to find out exactly how the Russians are working and target them and being able to fight them. This is only live experience. Facebook are not going to give you their screening algorithm, Twitter aren't, and sure as hell the Russians aren't going to teach you how they fight cyber wars so you can replicate that in a war game. Collecting that intelligence and preparing it that way necessarily happens. Then we hear from them, listen guys, populism is here to stay. And you say most of Robin's extension is actually prescribing a recipe for how our mechanism is to succeed. We say the case is to a very large extent uncomparative and that the problems that it identifies with the DNC's messages just continue to exist regardless of this motion being enacted or not. But we actually can solve them by advancing messages directly to the voters. To which they say, let the DNC advance these messages. First of all, the problem is these messages by the DNC reach the voters after they've already been primed by the Russian micro-targeting, after they already believe the fake news, which they're biased and predisposed to believe, after Cambridge Analytica has already built a profile of them and enabled the Russians to, in a sense, poison them, right? We arrived there sooner. But secondly, those messages are just mutually exclusive with a lot of messages that the DNC wants to give out to its voter. That's why it needs to come from a third party. Because if it's discovered that the DNC is doing these sorts of messages against Trump, that's actually detrimental to them. They need a third party to step in and advance messages which hurt Trump. Like Trump is a traitor of the American people, like Trump is a kleptocrat, like Trump is stealing to the banks, like Trump is weak in front of Kim Jong-un. The Democrats can't say that. They want to deal with Kim Jong-un. But we can say that, and that's effective targeting. Now, done with that. On the EU being found out. Now, here's the thing. We get a few responses. First of all, paper trail, like lol, only really stupid, right? You can actually erase the paper trails on those servers via cyber capability. And please note, we're the freaking EU. We can collaborate with specific companies, which, in order to establish contracts with them, in which they don't list a paper trail. Secondly, this idea that America is strong and rich. Now, but the incentives to defend from that are weak. Now they say, but the Russians are there. Maybe the Russians will tell them, but it doesn't exactly work that way. If we as the EU build assets which are actually useful in that context and look to stop the Russians, then we can do that. But the Russians are acting in a very one-way sort of way. They're just throwing darts on the dartboard and seeing what sticks. And that way they're extremely unlikely. And just like China finding us out, like guys, even cyber, it's not exactly how that works. China just doesn't have assets there, doesn't have the transport, doesn't have the data, doesn't have anything to use. Whistleblowers, guys, just screen them weekly with a lie detector. You will be fine, and don't enable them to leave the premises with electronic media. To be frank, the NSA should have done it, and other intelligence agencies too. Go.
So your point is the EU won't be found out because it is part of the highest level of security information sharing group in the world, and the other 4 nations they share all their top secrets with will never suspect a thing, and it's worth losing all of that.
No, because you're not found out. Guys, this is how the world of intelligence works. Firstly, you do a lot of things which are like not nice to your allies in the hope of not being found out because you have good enough advanced intelligence. Secondly, please note, they're massively overselling this harm. The US spied on the EU, like literally the NSA spied on Merkel, and shit did not go down to that extent. The entire like alliance did not break up. They're just massively overselling that harm. You see specifically, and Monica tells you this, the 2 actors involved, the US and the Russians, have all the incentives to not make this out to be such a big crime because they are likely to be caught in it in the future. So they have the incentive to undersell this harm and not make it a big deal. What's the big issue here? The Russians are still working, and we're forsaking the area to them because they think the Russians are going to lose. But the Russians are building their assets on Twitter. They do have more Twitter accounts like Tennessee GOP. They do have more ability to impact voters. They're getting better at targeting voters. They're getting better on doing that even with allies of the EU. And we say crucially, and they encourage far-right parties to run within the EU. And we say crucially, that fact means that firstly, if we forsake the field and don't engage in that crucial area of America, then we won't be able to deal with the Russians and fight with them in cyber in other areas. Secondly, we say the Russians will become so powerful that the micro-target, that their strategies will become more powerful in the 2018 election. We'll be able to target more voters in a more effective way. And we can actually prevent that by counteracting that because the information those voters receive is to a large extent mutually exclusive, as Monica tells you. And on the end of the day, you have on the other side 2 teams which have identified the severe problems with Russian messaging and offered no solution to solving them. We say the EU is measured enough and careful enough to take these steps in cyber information warfare in order to be able to intervene against Russia. And even if they are exposed, none of the actors have an incentive to make a big deal out of it. Thanks.
They will get found out. Why? The modus operandi of the Russian hackers is currently like this. They use a sophisticated VPN to make it seem like there's some dude living in his mom's basement in the middle of Ohio. And then they start spreading misinformation, or they try nudging discourse towards a particular point, like Hillary Clinton's emails. The thing about VPNs is that you are able to develop software that helps you identify and slowly unravel the VPNs and find exactly where the actual IP address of that particular person is. It's not particularly difficult. You will get found out, and all the harms that Robin talked about will accrue. Something that no one didn't deal with at all. But let's say it doesn't come about, right? You're not found out. Like it goes undetected. The harms will still accrue.
because you're not addressing the root causes of Trump populism. You are kicking him out of office on the basis of slander, and you're not doing that on the basis that he's a terrible president, that this is the wrong way for the American public to go through. And we think that's far more important, something I want to talk about in my speech. I'll be dealing with a few things. Firstly, will they get found out? Because apparently it's a huge part of this debate. I want to explain everything and recap whatever Robin said as well, because apparently I'm supposed to do that as well. Secondly, I want to talk about everything that Noam and Monica said. And then third, I want to talk about opening government, terribly sophisticated structuring of my speech. Firstly, will they get found out? I'll explain to you how exactly the VPNs will work. But beyond that, the United States is building up the defenses. They had a 5-hour congressional hearing interrogating executives from Facebook, Google, and all of them to identify what exactly these tech companies are doing to improve their defenses so that future political interference don't come about. And Facebook has acted upon that. They've set up an entire department dedicated to improving the defenses of social media platform websites like Facebook. In fact, what they're doing right now is that they give you this little marker and ask you to highlight, tick yes or no if you think this is politically a political act. They're building up their defenses because they recognize that there is this existing and ongoing threat. But beyond that, the CIA and the FBI are apolitical. Comey made that very, very clear many occasions on several news websites. But more importantly is this, they dropped the ball in 2016. The last thing they want to happen again is to be subsequently found out that they were slow in investigating, just like Rafi said, right? That they would be inhibited in their investigations. They would want to be more on the ball to try and identify any possible interference coming from Russia. So why is that bad? Because the moment you are identified, that is going to decimate the left, who finds it infinitely more difficult to distance themselves from accusations that they're anti-American. In the face of increasing Trump nationalism, where it's easy to batter the left, we think that's massively terrible. In any event, it's going to accrue anyway. Let's deal with closing government. They said we need to improve the EU and we need to do this so that we can improve our defenses. Let's investigate that claim. It doesn't work. The reality of cyber defense is this. The attacks will always outstrip the defense. The best you can do is to ensure that you do not lag too far behind these attacks and you set up as many defenses as you possibly can. That is the reality. But more importantly is this. Different cyber attackers attack in different ways. That's the most important point here. Right now, Russia is using Facebook. But if you then start using Facebook, they're going to find other ways to develop it. That's the whole point. The only way they can stay ahead of the curve. So what does that mean? That means you can't actually improve your defenses in the way you are thinking about because you guys start attacking people in different ways. So we don't think that necessarily comes through. Next, the only way to know the message, because you need to test the waters to see what appeals to certain people. No, that's not how you do it. And you can't just do it after the elections. No, that's not correct. What did Obama do? Volunteers, armies of volunteers went door to door, picked up phones, called individual voters to find out what appeals to them, what exactly they are concerned about. They want to know what exactly concerns these people so they can then target their advertising and target their messages to address the concerns of these people. And that's why we think that's how you get the information out. We don't think we need your policy at all. Next, I want to talk about opening government, which is a deprivation of political oxygen, where you slowly remove Trump staffers and you slowly remove his political support base. Rafi made this radical argument that during the elections, it was not drip, 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 but now he's going to make it drip, drip, drip for some reason. Let's examine that claim. News about him being peed on by Russian prostitutes came out. There was furor, died down. The following week, he was caught on video saying that he was going to grab women by a certain part of their anatomy. Furor went down again. Then there were other drips as well, right? Like, for example, that he's a terrible person, that he's not as rich as he is, that he ties with the Manhattan mob, and all these things didn't derail Trump at all. Now, we think that's going to continue, right? But what's the problem with that? We think that the Trump base is starting to be very introspective. Like, what did he do before? He went to coal country and he said, coal baby, coal, mine baby, mine, coal baby, coal. But the coal country right now is starting to have doubts as to whether he is actually delivering on his claims. Because their lot in life has not been improved. In fact, even the petroleum guys have some concerns, right? Because their concerns are antithetical to coal country. Because the more you go towards coal, you cut into the profits that they have. So everybody that Trump has swindled is starting to ask questions about whether this guy is actually going to deliver on the promises that he claimed that he will, that he promised, but is not actually delivering. Yes?
Yeah, the Steele dossier is already enough for Trump to claim EU conspiracy, which is CEO's only harm. when we target congressional officials, and we make Trump presidency ineffective, which is what we want to achieve.
Basically, right? So you immediately take out some people. More people will come in. The Scaramucci's of the world will see this as an opportunity to get a blue chip job in the White House. Upstarts, freshly graduated from the Ivy Leagues, will see this as an opportunity to come in. People like Stephen Miller, who assisted Jeff Sessions, will finally find this as an opportunity to have his time in the sun, and he'll fill those vacant positions that will start to open in the White House. True, they won't be operating at 100% capacity, but it will be enough for them to ensure they continue sticking. So what's the harms with that? Exactly what Monica was saying, right? Monica said, we need to crowd out the Russian message. We need to have more well-liked pages. But you're going to muddy the discourse, right? You're countering rumor with more rumor and slander. What we want is for people to identify the issues and realize that he's not delivering on his message. We want what Sarah Innamorato and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have been doing, which has been knocking on door to door in the Borough of Queens, engaging people and highlighting that whilst you may have been a Trump supporter, he is not delivering on the promises that he said he will deliver on that will ultimately benefit you. And that's what we want to happen, right? We don't want you to be focused and distracted by the fact that he got peed on by Russian prostitutes. We want you to focus on the fact that he's not helping you, he's bad for you, and then move the discourse away and ensure that the left is not completely decimated. And for these reasons, I'm extremely proud to oppose.